Yes, that's it. We're back at it again, my faithful brawlers, with the next installment of Superhuman ASL. I know it took me a while to get back to this, but now let's get right into it. We first left off right as they were arriving at Whiskey Peak, and the same events would, I think, transpire. Probably with maybe with Luffy being more cautious of how welcoming the being to do it straight off, but he would still eat eat. He wouldn't eat himself into a coma because he would be a bit more wary than before, but he wouldn't really sense much danger from them at all. And if anything did otherwise, he would just be able to count on either Zoro or Sanji to help out, which does indeed end up happening. Luffy's actually very aware when Zoro does wake up and go out to see what's going on, and he decides he'll let Zoro stretch his legs a bit. Of course, the same events would transpire. Zoro would indeed be confronted with the Baroque billions or millions, I think, and it would end even worse for him than it did before. Worse for them than it did before, because instead of blitzing them like he does in the original, he would actually test out his iron body technique. They would shoot the bullets at him as he would step forward very slowly, and each and every one of them would just pretty much bounce off his skin as he just smirks at them maliciously. This would incredibly reduce morale, and then he would have no trouble almost absolutely destroying them afterwards. It wouldn't even be a fight. In fact, he would be done before Mr. 5 and Mr. Wednesday even got there. It would be that much of a slaughter. Over in less than a minute or two. Zoro's actually surprised by how much these techniques Luffy has taught him have actually helped. When they went to one had actually helped, even though Luffy himself said he hadn't mastered it, he knew enough to at least coach them on the basics. Then of course Zoro and Sanji, Zoro being the prodigal fighter he is, would learn from experience more so than learn from the experience of using it and how it felt. And Sanji was was always willing to try to kick him, just to test it out, how tough he was. He spoke does he remember the one time he actually got it. The time he actually got it right and Sanji almost broke his leg. He chuckled at seeing the Morabrow actually be forced to do some, actually limping like that. Then after this, he's of course attacked by Mr. Then of course Luffy comes out and he's looking around and he's not as bloated as he was before. Although he is a bit bloated because he did at least eat. No, he's not gonna pass up a free meal. He looks around at Zoro's handiwork and he's like, "Good job, Zoro. Looks like I was right to sit this one out. I could use a break." Zoro just nodded at Luffy and he's like, "Well, and they probably would have been a waste of your time anyway. They certainly were a waste of mine." And both of them completely ignore Mr. 5 and Miss Wednesday until Mr. 5 and Miss that lady that can make herself weigh a lot. And when they do attack them, Zoro and Luffy actually just knock them aside. They flick them aside. Zoro knocked Luffy just knocks Mr. 5 out with a flick, and weight and the Kilo lady is just completely and utterly smacked aside by Zoro. Both of them unconscious in the buildings. Vivi sees this, and then the same event would go down with Nami coming, except Nami's actually just impressed with how we'll manage to do this so quickly. Nami would talk Vivi and helping them, thinking she can get money out of it, and then they would have the pictures drawn by Mr. 13 as well, and given to the thing. Then they would all just go back to the Going Merry. We would miss all Sunday there. Luffy Luffy's observation hockey is not as good, nowhere near as good as it is at the time skip when he can see the future, but it is to the point where he can sense that this woman doesn't really mean any harm. She's not an ally, but she doesn't mean any harm. She then goes about the task of giving them the eternal pose to Nainamai Island, and Luffy takes it, looks at it, and contemplates what he should do. He immediately crushes it, and then instead of crushing it, he just tosses it aside to Nami and says, "You don't decide where we go." Oh, and just and tells her to leave the ship. They leave, and then they go to Little Green Island. And on little island arc, they of course it's a summer, and of course this is where they meet Dory and Borgie. I really wish they brought those two back, because that would be interesting. So now with Vivi in tow, they soon arrive at Little Green Island, which is a misnomer as the island is anything but little, and it's actually in fact very full of giants. Zoro and Sanji would still have that big talk about who can get more meat first and who can get the better meat, and they would still go off on a hunting expedition. Yes, and Nami and Usopp would actually learn about why it's called that still, and who inhabited it. They would be terrified of him at Rugi like in the original, but then they would all. And another giant who shows up and decapitates T-Rex. But they are quickly surprised that the giants are very hospitable. But when just takes them home to have a meal. Nice giants. I really wish we would see more of them like in the new arcs. Like maybe they got off the island and became friends again. And also now the Baroque agents Mr. 5 and Mr. 3 and her partner Miss Golden Week would also get together and reveal that each of the giants has a bounty of 100 million berries. 100 million berries each. That would go about the same. And then Nami and Usopp would learn that Dory and Borgie actually have been fighting here for 100 years to decide over a reason that they had long since forgotten. Of course, it's revealed over a hunting competition which got them exiled from Elbaf in the first place, which actually does inspire Usopp even greater to become a proud warrior. Because remember, he already had a stronger inclination to do that because everyone else around him and Nami are so much stronger. But this time around, it was also to inspire Nami as well, because her and Usopp are some of the weakest people on the team as of right now. And if they want to be able to stand toe to toe with their teammates, they're gonna need to be able to be stronger. Yep. Excuse me, hit that with my nose real quick. And it's luckily for them, Usopp had just completed Nami's climate attack, which he actually does have now in this scenario, instead of just getting it once he goes into Arabasta. Meaning that he's gonna be able to work out the kinks of it a lot faster. Also, Usopp does upgrade his ammo and his slingshots earlier in this timeline as well, meaning he has better ammo and better aim. Similar to what he had when he fought Luffy before the Going Merry, and almost to the point where he has it when they fight, when they go into the Towers of Justice and rescue Frankie and Robin. And his tech savviness has actually gone up exponentially. And Nami. So both of them are equally inspired. Usopp obviously more so, and actually wants to go to Elbaf to the Island of Warriors, which he tells both of them. them. Wait, where was Luffy? Wait, where was Luffy doing any of this? And Luffy himself is just going around the island himself, just seeing if he can test out his observation haki. Because for some reason, his instincts just tell him that he should be capable, that he should be. Because Luffy in this scenario is always constantly improving himself. The original Luffy is always doing that as well, but there's only like intense moments, like maybe after a defeat, or maybe when he's training, like for when he was going into the new world. But this time around, he's always doing like little training exercises to try to like increase his proficiency and his abilities. Especially considering he still hasn't even come close to his limitations, and he can feel it because he has a better sense of like what he can do because of how because of the Wokoshiki techniques and enhancing one's abilities well past what normal humans would be capable of. And it even works on superhumans like Luffy as well. So he would know that he's capable of doing much more, and he would be wanting to get more into that like getting more into his own style. It's already encouraged Zoro to train even harder than he was knowing, and even Sanji himself finds himself doing some squats every now and then while he's cooking unconsciously to strengthen up his legs. So, but he senses something on the ship, and he senses that the Straw Hats had some beer they were gonna give to Dory. However, they realize that Luffy stops him from drinking it, and actually asks Sanji to inspect it. Sanji comes over, and Luffy asks him to see if he can sense anything wrong with it. Sanji senses that he gets a bad feeling about it. Sanji actually has superhuman feelings when it comes to food, and with his observation haki, he can even see that there's just something up with it. He dips his finger into it and takes it out and rubs it between his fingers, and a small explosion happens. It doesn't hurt him of course, but it does show that somebody tampered with the drink, meaning they managed to avoid Dory suffering internal injuries from Mr. Five using his devil food, and he doesn't attack Luffy thinking he's responsible. Well, of course, this Dory is, of course, enraged and starts to think that, but he's not as angry as he thought he would be, because they just discovered that this was poisoned. They don't know that and Luffy and Sanji both manage to sense that there are more people on the island than just the crew. Dory is, of course, furious and realizes that somebody tried to interfere with his drink, and even kill him. And Luffy quickly summarizes that some of the Baroque agents must have followed him to the island. And then he looks to Dory, and he tells him to, and he asks him if him and his, and he asks Dory if him and he quickly goes to Dory and asks him if him and Boogie want to help him take them down. Dory, he leans in. Luffy starts to tell them like the plan. Meanwhile, whereas with Mr. Tree and Miss Golden Lock, they are having a hard time trying to capture Zoro, and they don't have that same encounter with the dinosaur, because with the greater technology, Zoro, Nami and Usopp were able, and the stronger wills, Usopp and Nami are actually able to take the dinosaur down, meaning they don't even get to capture two of them. Vivi never really suspected that the Baroque works are there. Actually, Vivi's with Luffy when he finds out about the giants. So the Baroque agents don't really get to capture anyone in this scenario. Dory and Boogie pretend to be fighting while Dory, we pretend that he drank the liquid from that the bomb actually exploded in him, drinking the liquid from it. Mr. 3 even tried to use his wax and make him trip, but in reality, both of the giants went on his plan. So he pretends to so Borgie pretends to defeat Dory. Mr. 3 covers him like in a bit of wax, but before he can cover him all the way, Borgie actually breaks out and grabs Mr. 3 and slams him into the ground, whereas Luffy just knocks him out cold with a single gum pistol. So that ends Mr. 3 pretty quickly. He also never get the trap Zoro, Vivi, Nami, and Borgie and the wax as stated before. And Luffy never gets trapped in that colors trap from Miss Golden Week. In fact, he never really encounters them at all, and they take out the others pretty quickly. Sanji also. And then after Sanji enjoys a tea party in Mr. 3's candle house and proceeds to lie to Crocodile and proceed to be the sly, smooth operating spy he is, and just fakes having killed the Strawhats and assassinated them in Mr. 3's place, pretending to be a Baroque agent. And he's still that awesome spy. Claiming to be and he's ordered to go to Arabasta because and this time around, however, Mr. Zero Crocodile actually thinks he did complete it because he's not interrupted. So he actually does think that they might. He's not fully convinced, but he thinks more so that he probably did kill Vivi and the Straw Hats. Gets the eternal pose, and then Dory and Borgie bid the Straw Hats farewell by slaying the Island Eater who attempts to eat the ship as it's leaving. Pretty much breaking the weapons apart as in the original. And Usopp makes a promise to go to the Elbaf, the Island of Warriors, and they leave I keep wondering why I keep calling it Little Green Garden. It's just Little Garden arc. So the Little Garden arc is pretty much the same, but then we get to the... Wait, no, not this one. Oh, yeah, then we get to the Drum Island arc. Now, in the Drum Island arc, Nami, I think, would still probably get sick with that thing. Would probably still get sick. With the with that bug bite because he would still be dressed like that. So he still catches a fever. They're forced to land on the detour of Drum Island. And on the way there, they're actually attacked by Wobble. And Luffy defeats him very easily in this time around. Actually hitting him with a gum. Hitting him just with a simple gum pistol. And it actually knocks him way further than in the original. No, and he actually defeats. He doesn't use as much power because he doesn't believe Wapple is worth it. So Wapple is still in the game relatively somewhat, but he is very injured from that one punch. But if Wapple is not anything, he's at least, somewhat stubborn and too dumb to give up when he should. So they make it to Drum Island. Then the locals are immediately hostile towards them. But in this scenario, Luffy is quick to understand them and doesn't try to fight them straight away. In fact, he actually just lets them know what's happening. along with Vivi. Dalton lets them in quite easily. In the recent time, and they hear about how Walpole was like the king before. Banners all 20 doctors had hired 20 other doctors, so that anyone who wanted treatment had to come to him. There's only one doctor called Dr. Korea. He lives in Drum Castle. He's at the highest of the Drum Rockies. So they go there. Luffy and Sanji both go there this time around because they're two of the fastest members of the Strawhats. He can't really go that fast because Nami's like that. However, when they're attacked by the giant and Wakuro's rabbits, Sanji tells Luffy not to even fight because Nami's on top of him, and he quickly defeats them without causing the avalanche due to how fast and fluid his movements are. Meaning the avalanche doesn't happen and he never gets injured. Not that he would have been injured due to how tough his body is. He then looks up and decides to at least try that move Luffy was talking about the skywalk. He starts to remember Luffy's explanations of it, and even remembers some, and tries to at least be able to do it. He only barely manages to even catch it, but he's carrying Luffy and me on his back while he's doing this, like Luffy carried him and not me. While he's doing this he's also taking breaks with Luffy, meaning both of them are interchanging. Luffy's climbing with both of them, and due to Luffy being vastly stronger and just having way better stamina and endurance than before, he climbs one part of the mountain, and Sanji practices his skywalk on the other. It soon gets to the point where his legs are too tired, though, and Sanji needs to just climb alongside Luffy. But Luffy insists that he can carry Sanji and Nami at the same time. However, Sanji doesn't want to even risk him and especially not Nami, falling due to exhaustion despite what he's seen his captain do. So he just elects to climb on his own. They both reach it, and Luffy is, and only Nami's the only one who needs any treatment. So Luffy and Sanji are actually very much in peak condition, even if Sanji is a little bit tired. Then Walpole returns, but he is injured from what Luffy did to him before. In fact, you can even still see specks of blood on his mouth. When Dalton attacks them this time, he's able to do a bit more damage due to Walpole being injured already, but he is still relatively defeated, and then an injured Walpole and his crew start to go up into the mountain. Luffy was trying to chase, and of course Luffy was trying to chase after Chopper. Some of his childlike nature getting out because he's seen a talking reindeer. Of course he would want to join the crew very badly. However, he would have a lot more time to get to know Chopper because he's conscious the entire time. So him and Chopper would actually bond way quicker. Chopper, Dr. Who. And we learn about Chopper's backstory and stuff. Walpole would still try to seize the castle, except in this time around, Sanji's awake, meaning him and Luffy are both just going to whack Walpole. I think Walpole would still try to shoot Dr. Who's flag. Luffy would protect it. Then Walpole would eat something. However, Sanji wouldn't let him do that. He would pretty much wreck Walpole with absolute ease before Luffy even gets a chance to. And it would even be worse for Walpole because he's quite literally incapable of fighting at full capacity due to being injured. However, Sanji doesn't have any respect for him, so he just bullies him with no hesitation. And once that's done, Luffy just sends him away with a Gum Gum Bazooka. Not because he needs to, but just simply because he doesn't want to see Walpole's face on this island ever again. Something he tells him to his face. Needless to say, Walpole is now dealt with with ease. Then we see the cherry blossoms in the snow after Chomp finally decided to join the Straw Hats. The Straw Hats, and from that point onwards, Koya and Dalton are looking over the ends, waving Chomp goodbye. We found out that Luffy's full name is Monkey D. Luffy, being that we find out about the Will of D a bit. Two villagers give Luffy a message from Ace. Ace, who was in Arabasta for 10 days. He's days. However, I think Luffy would take time to at least observe around him a bit more to get the message, but it wouldn't really matter because they're already about to go into Arabasta anyway. So they would head into Arabasta to quite similarly to what. So they would head into Arabasta quite very similar to what they did in a similar manner to what they did in canon. And then when they reached it, they would run across the land of Alarum before a massive war breaks out between the kingdoms of Gold and Rebels. However, they would learn from Vivi that Mr. Zero is actually the one who is staging a war in Arabasta for his own ends. They would end the going man. They would actually catch Mr. 2, who is on a similar curse, and he would, of course, still entertain them with his ability to mimic everyone on the crew except Sanji and Vivi. Vivi, like in the original, because Sanji's still cooking, which is kind of good because that means he doesn't get by that they also see it as good fortune like in the original. And then when they go into the port town of Nonohara, Portuguese the Ace is interrupted by Smoker of the Marines until Luffy comes crashing in through the door. He leads the Marines directly to his crew. But in this time around, he doesn't lead them directly to his crewmates. He actually decides to take a detour. After they purchase the money from they needed in town. Smoker, he actually uses sword to get away, very quickly disappearing from Smoker's sight. Smoker loses track of him, and Ace doesn't really need to save them this time around. However, Ace does eventually find Luffy, and they have that nice little talking bond before, but the only slight difference is that they're talking about have each of them been practicing their powers. Luffy, of course, has, and so has Ace, which he demonstrates when they're attacked by some Baroque agents in the billions, and Ace just stands there as their weapons and their guns do nothing to him, and one of them even breaks their sword on his head. He really just couldn't be bothered to block their attacks. Even wussing into some of them with his iron was just tackling them straight to the ground and into walls at ease. Whereas Luffy's comedy style actually just manages to let him bob and weave without any hesitation. Both of them just flexing on the billions. They didn't sail to the Ace hops onto the ship, and everyone sees that this is his brother. That Ace is Luffy's brother. Sanji, with both Sanji and Zoro actually asking him if he can do any of the abilities and special powers that Luffy can do, and Ace says he can do Ace says that he can do the Iron Bot. He has mastered both the Iron Body and the Wind Blade technique. Both Zanzi and Zoro ask if he can give them a better, instruction on how to do them since he taught it. Zanzi wants to be able to do it with his legs, whereas Zoro wants to be able to have a better mastery of Iron Body. And Ace himself looks like he's managed to pretty much get a handle on them better than the two of them have. Makes sense considering he's been doing it longer, but the two of them still would rather have that extra bit of formal training, despite the self-taught experience in the both of them. Now, this would actually give Ace some pause. He actually didn't intend to stay with them that long, but then again, he was looking for Blackbeard. However, if they were going into the New World, Ace would of course want them to be as strong as possible, so he would just suggest, okay. So he would say, okay, but when we get... I think Ace would be a bit hesitant to want to stay too long, but I do think that eventually he would just say, okay, but once we get to the next island, I'm hopping off. And you two better be ready for some of the most grueling training you can imagine. Zoro and Sanji are both excited. Sanji offers Ace some tea in the original. And when the Baroque ships come into view, Ace wants to show off a bit, so before Luffy can just decimate the ships with one of his gifts, with his abilities, he just with a new ability he had been thinking of since he saw the giants, or more like an ability he had wanted inspiration for, but now he can do it this time around. It's like Ace just completely decimates them before he can even move too much, which of course irritates Luffy, but then again, he's just happy to see that Ace hasn't slacked off. And then the Straw Hats would go on the west side as handle a river. Wherever they encounter the Kung Fu Kadang, that would go the same way it did in canon. And then they would go into they would get the Great Lizard. So Sanji would show himself being a hunter and just kill it with absolute ease before anyone else could move. They get the camel, who happens to be a pervert, but just a womanizer. They're giving only Nami and Vivi a ride. They didn't have gathered at the spot. The officers gathered at the Spider's Cafe like in the original. So they arrive at the Oasis, which is the rebel supposed hideout of the rebels, but only civilians are left in the town. The rebels are in the near. Pretty much everything else like that would go similarly, except Luffy would of course knock some sense into Vivi, telling her that stopping the rebels won't get rid of Crocodile, won't prevent any loss of life, and they go to the Wayne base where Crocodile resides. He does this way more seriously and way more eloquently in his speech, saying, listen, if we don't cut off the head of the snake, it'll just regrow itself. So he knocks sense into her and she agrees that they're all risking their lives for her, and they go there. Meanwhile, the Baroque works meet up with Miss All Sunday and Crocodile in the Wayne casino. They go over what they've learned, and they realize that the Straw Hats are way stronger than they could have anticipated. They get the pictures, and he doesn't think Chomp is a threat because he thinks he's a pet, etc. They go at the Wayne base. They arrive at the Wayne base, and Luffy is of course thirsty. Except this time around, Luffy, Nami, Usopp, Zoro, Smoker are not all caught because Luffy can sense the trap, and he knocks all the others out of the way before the Sea Stone Cage can be completed. Vivi is surrounded by the villains, Vivi is surrounded by villains though, but Pell saves her, meaning that now Luffy is not confined, and Crocodile's right there. So Luffy just cracks his knuckles and he's like, "Okay, hey, Crocodile, try to give me a hey, you're Crocodile, right? A warlord. Try to give me a good fight. Right? I haven't had a good challenge since I came into the Grand Line." Crocodile just grits his teeth because he thinks Luffy's being a cocky little shit and the two begin to duke it out. Meaning that Vivi's never forced to rescue them. He does to them, and Crocodile's obviously not gonna flood the area while he's still in there. And due to Luffy not fighting him in the desert, Crocodile doesn't have as much overwhelming raw power that he would in the with. Also, Luffy it's kind of a stalemate between the two. Luffy is way more powerful, stronger, faster, and way more experienced in hand-to-hand combat. It seemed. Whereas Crocodile has the Logia fruit, so Luffy can only really hit him with hockey or even probably water. However, there's not a lot of. So Luffy decides if he wants to use the hockey or the water. Water, but considering there's no water around, he decided to practice his all-in hockey. And with one solid hit, he manages to land it straight in Crocodile's midsection, and in his face, and in his gut, and in his up, and in his face again, and his legs, and his quads. He just unleashes an all-in hockey Gatlin. Some of them have hockey, but some of them don't. It just depends on how hard he hit and how much he's focusing. And right now, he is pretty much focusing. He hits Crocodile in the air with one final hit, and with that hit, he manages to effectively defeat Crocodile pretty much. Landing a final gum rifle straight to the chest just to ensure it. So Crocodile was defeated much earlier in this scenario due to Luffy's adeptness, somewhat novice with hockey. But then again, he always had good instincts, so that plus his hockey would still be pretty effective. If Sanji would show up with the crocodile, I don't know if the crocodile will be released, but he just beats the crocodile with ease. And from that point onwards, there's not really much else. Luffy just sends Sanji and Zoro to go deal with Sanji and Zoro to deal with the other two. The other agents, of course, do come in to see what happened, see that their boss is beaten, and they thought to fight the Strawhats. Nami challenges Miss Doublefinger. Sanji fights Bon Kui, and Zoro fights Mr. One. Now, Sanji actually is practicing his kick blade, his air blades, but it's of course nowhere near as powerful as something Ace would be able to do with his arms, but he can at least send them flying somewhat. But it's not really that powerful, and the range is really short. If his legs hadn't been as strong as they were, he probably wouldn't have even been able to do it at all. However, this does increase. However, he has found out that while he can't do it like that, he can at least extend the force of his kick well beyond what it would be. Meaning he's able to get through Mr. 3's range with Mr. 2's range with relative ease, and even beats him sooner than and isn't as injured while he does it. Nami's climb attack, of course, when she used it on the island, she found it was just for joke, so Usopp did upgrade it. And she has a one that's similar to the ones he had in his lobby, meaning that she pretty much just begins to finesse around Mr. Doublefinger, distracting her with mirages, then distracting her with fog, and then finally ending her with lightning straight to the chest. A way stronger bolt than before knocking her up with the climb attack. Then Zoro also fights Mr. 1, and he's injured way less than in the original because of his iron body. Yeah, sure, sometimes the blades do cut deeper, but it's never a big spout of blood. And due to his iron body being as strong as it is he's also managed to be able to somewhat utilize it with his physical strikes. strikes, and even begins to copy what he saw Ace do and send not a big wave of air blades. He hasn't progressed to that level yet in just a couple of days, but he has managed to make his sword attacks way more potent. So they managed to cut through Mr. One sooner than in the original, and he still has. And do I still think his blade? And he does pick up his blade, and he managed to cut him with 3 blades the time around, albeit with difficulty. So he beats Mr. One, and Mr. One's impressed and says good luck. And from this point onwards, the Straw Hats and Vivi and all of them just go on to pretty much, just take down the Woke from the inside. They're already in the base, so they just look for, Sanji looks for something, recalls the agents there, all the agents get there, and the Straw Hats just put them into place. Then Arabasta saved, and then they have that big feast with the king, and there's not really any real challenge that was for the Straw Hats here. Especially not Luffy, who was actually very disappointed because Crocodile actually was an interesting opponent, but he beat them pretty easily. Albeit if Luffy didn't have Haki, he admits it would have been a way tougher fight. But then again, Crocodile wouldn't have been able to take him down anyway, and it would just be a battle of attrition, So he just kind of is like, maybe next time. And then, of course, Miss All Sunday Robin saw this. She just saw this new Wookiee pirate just almost effortlessly, with minimal effort, beat one of the most powerful pirates he had seen up to that point. To say that Robin would be shocked at this is an understatement. She would actually be incredibly impressed, because she did not expect the Straw Hat to be this strong. She's even shocked when Luffy saved her time around. And Luffy and the Straw Hats know she's there in the place, but they don't consider her a threat. Luffy especially. So when all said and done, they leave because they leave with the new crew member Vivi. They do the little cool pose with the X's on the back of their hands. And of course, Robin decides to. And of course, when they leave, Robin is like, "Hey, I'm coming with you guys." And of course, none of them really have an issue with that. I mean, at this point, she hasn't threatened them or even hurt them in any way, shape, or form. So they're like, "Yeah, it's whatever. Come on." So then Robin, of course, joins the crew as well. Well, and then and of course, Ace is still there too. Ace has been just kind of out of the way because he wants to see how his brother and his crew would do on their own. And he's impressed. He remembered that back in the day that this Crocodile guy actually fought his old man Whitebeard. And if Luffy can beat him this easily, this early on, well, somewhat easily. He still chides Luffy on him not being as proficient in Haki as him and Sabo are. And he decides that while he's there, he might as well teach Luffy more about Haki as well. Well, because remember, Ace has all 3 types of Haki. Of course, he was never. Of course, Ace doesn't. I think he would at least find that out while he was with Whitebeard. I don't think, but the two of them would only practice mostly with the 2 basic forms of Haki for now. Even though Ace does tell Luffy he can feel that he probably has it. And while they're going to like Jaya Island, the Jaya arc, they actually are headed straight for that island. That island as of now. And we enter the Sky Island saga. And of course, they see that ship fall from the sky. And the log pose begins pointing up, saying that it goes to the Jaya Island. Or what they would call Bachtown. They then They then put on some types of. They didn't put on some diving gear. They go down there to like view the island. Even they then would go down there to view the ship. They would be wearing some diving gear and stuff, and that would go largely similarly. They would go down there with the magnet field at the Sky Island. They would learn about that. They would come across giant silhouettes as well. Nami would take Robin would still manage to take an eternal pose from the nearby islands. He would bond with Chopper, just like in the original, and Chopper would have a bit of a stronger bond with Sanji and Luffy because they were both awake. Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, of course, went down the water to check the wreck and started beating up the crew like Mishiwa's crew, like in the original. So Mishiwa goes down and confronts them with a giant sea turtle who comes along to swallow the ship, but all three of them escape. Escape. Instead of running out of fear, though, Luffy would prepare to fight them. They would all prepare to fight the silhouettes. Robin manages to take some the eternal pose from Jiraiya's ship, from Mari's ship, and they would go to find more information. So, with that being said, they would come to the resort of Executioner, a pirate with a 40 million berry, who's in a Pokemon Bellamy the Hyena, a pirate with a berry of 55 million. And Barry would, of course, just murder a man cold blood, like in the original. When they're in Markdown, the group of Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Ace this time around actually start to go looking around for like the several people. Ace was true to his word. He's gonna start leaving after they just hang out for a bit on this island, and then he's gonna go back to looking for Blackbeard. They later, and of course, everyone knows who Ace is, so nobody insults them. Bellamy looks at Luffy, and even with Luffy's higher bounty, he still thinks it's a bit fake because he was petty like that then. He sees Ace right next to him, and he's like, oh shit, maybe he was right. And he just immediately forgets everything he was going to do, and just puts his head back down. They end up in a bar, and of course, who do they see right in the bar? Blackbeard. Ace is looking square at the man who pretty much killed his friend Tack. And Luffy looks over at Ace and he sees a glare that he hadn't seen on Ace since when he first met him, before Ace learned compassion. And he looks over at Blackbeard and he immediately knows what's happening. I mean, Luffy, with the biggest voice he can, orders everybody out of the bar and tells everybody to get out of the town, and he orders his crew to get back to the ship immediately. And while they're going, and they do happen to run into Blackbeard's crew, who were on their way to rendezvous with the captain. Then when Luffy asks, when they just ask Straw Hat if he knows where Blackbeard is when he runs into them, because they should have met up a while ago, and they see the explosions of and they see the massive explosions of darkness and fire just clashing with one another. And they're going to go help Blackbeard because in this scenario he hasn't told them to not get in the fight. Luffy sees what they're going to do, and without hesitation, he completely knocks out Burgess with one hit. Chomp. Hit. Zoro completely messes up Zoro just cut the sniper's weapon in half and then cuts him unconscious. Conscious. This and Nami electrocutes the hat guy as Zoro just knocks him out with the pommel of his sword, and then the sick guy is just taken out by all three of them at once. At once. Now, needless to say, the Blackbeard crew at this point wouldn't be much of an issue for the Straw Hats. Maybe after the time skip, but now, especially with a stronger Straw Hat crew, they wouldn't be much of an issue. Ace and Blackbeard's fight is just as catastrophic as it was on that other island they fought on. Except this time around, Ace is not as dependent on his devil fruit anymore. Meaning he actually has way better defense than he did in the original, and with his arm blades, he actually has better range as well, being able to hit Blackbeard from a way larger range and damage him that way. And because he's not over-reliant on his devil fruit, he actually has better stamina and endurance due to the iron body technique. Meaning when Blackbeard actually even does manage to land a hit, it doesn't do nearly as much damage as it would before. Because he's draining the devil fruit, but not Ace's physical body, which is naturally tougher than his is. So when they fight this time around, Ace actually starts to wear Blackbeard down way earlier than when he was worn down. And as Blackbeard stated, he can sense pain greater than the normal humans. So Ace has a lot of factors going for him in the stamina and endurance department. And meaning he starts to beat Blackbeard down extremely. Both of them are actually very tired, winded, and injured by the end of the fight. However, Ace can handle his injuries a lot more due to his training, and Blackbeard's pain receptors is just going haywire. They finish it off with the Flame Emperor and Darkness Take You techniques. And by the time they do that, and then they clash like in the original, and then they clash with each other like in the original, what the shit? He's not here. Go. No, I gotta put something in the box. Yeah. Okay, go. Now when they clash this time around, Ace is the one. Both of them are standing somewhat, but both of them then collapse out of exhaustion. However, both of them collapse out of exhaustion this time around. Ace is the one that does wake up first, and he sees that Blackbeard is just barely getting up. He captures Blackbeard, and he captures Blackbeard like he planned on doing. Gets in his ship because his crew had taken a very bad beating from the Straw Hats before his crew can even realize what's happening, and he's off to take Blackbeard to Whitebeard. He just barely won, and he's still gravely injured. But for the time being, but that's before Blackbeard is up. But that's before something different happened. So he has captured Blackbeard. However, he's still gravely injured from the fight, and that big spectacle didn't go unnoticed by some Marines that just happened to be passing by. And due to how injured he is at the moment, he's unfortunately not as and due to him having to drag Blackbeard around, he's unfortunately not as able to withstand the Marines at this point. But then again, actually, never mind. He's able to Ace does just begin to take Blackbeard back to Whitebeard's ship. Of course. But then again, but we'll see if he manages to get there at a later date. But he does have Blackbeard captured. And I think that's an interesting way to end this season, end this part. So, stay faith for my ballers, and let's see what happens when I have to go on the way to Skypiea. And stay faith.